Welcome to Healthcare Headlines. I'm Amber Walsh, Chair of the Healthcare Department at McGuireWoods. Today, I will be speaking with Roy Bejarano, CEO and co-founder of Scale Physician Group, on successful integration of physician practices into private equity-backed physician practice management platforms. This topic is critically important for numerous reasons. One of which is frankly sheer deal volume. Deal volume in Q4 of 2020 coming out of the pandemic really picked up across healthcare private equity. We've talked about that on our podcast and in other forums. And that deal volume was dominantly in the physician practice management or PPM sector, more so than in facilities. So I'm really pleased to have Roy here to talk to us about this phenomenon and the critical importance of integration. Roy, can you start by just briefly telling us about Scale and some thoughts on why you believe that successful integration has become such an important topic? I mentioned deal volume myself, but surely there are other reasons in your view why integration is such a hot topic for private equity investors and PPM platform leadership.
Thank you, Amber. Well, I'll start with the second question, which is why integration? Why is it so relevant today? And then I'll sort of double back onto Scale and what we're doing about it. So the truth about integration is that it's almost formulaically connected to acquisition volume. One comes with the other, and I can't imagine separating those two verbs. What you acquire, you inherently have to integrate. And so the more you acquire, the more you have to integrate. And what's interesting is, as someone like you who's very involved in PPM acquisitions, you hear the focus on acquisition activity by management teams and by investors and by stakeholders again and again and again. How much M&A activity was there this year, last year? But you don't see as much attention and focus on the sibling of acquisition, which is integration, the other child. But what you really, if you think about it, we should be spending an equal amount of time, 50-50, on those two verbs. Whatever we acquire, we have to integrate. And unfortunately, a lot of that unspoken burden is sort of implicitly put on the shoulders of existing management teams. Now that we have collectively acquired by spending money collectively, we're going to outsource the follow-up workload to you, Mr. Manager, Mrs. Manager, and good luck. And I think because of the volume of acquisitions that are out there, we probably have to do a little bit better than that and really delve into the subject and see what else we can offer our management teams in terms of resources to lessen the load. So with that in mind, Scale was formed 2 years and 2 months ago with the idea of organizing that resource, that source of help that management teams frequently need. And what we've found over the past 2 years, as we've grown to 140 people, of which there are 60 dedicated healthcare experts, discipline experts, 50 plus former CEOs of healthcare companies, a whole project management team focused on execution at the MSO level, is that help me, I'm integrating, is one of the most common asks that we've seen out there, maybe arguably the most common, which is really saying something because we've been structured, built in order to help MSO management teams with anything. And we've been asked for many things. We've been asked for help in specific departments that are underperforming. We've been asked to help with corp dev, seeking out opportunities and acquiring opportunities. We've been asked for strategic partnerships, board governance, management retention, provider retention. Pretty much the whole scope of needs have been presented to us. So we're in a good position to report back what's the most underserved need out there from MSO managers. And if you asked me to give you feedback today, I would say it's probably integration, top of the list.
So are there particular trends that you're seeing PPM leadership focus on? Anything you're using as a tool right now, a strategy for integration that you hadn't even thought about, or at least PPM leadership hadn't thought about a year ago, say?
Yeah, so it's interesting. When we started Scale, we thought of integration as this difficult enigma that no one seems to be getting right from our small vantage point. And our vantage point was heavily focused around bankered, non-integrated practices, offering themselves to larger MSOs, a sort of a package deal to be integrated post-close. And there was reliance on the given banker team to do a lot of the integration along with these practices, and then the private equity group and maybe an augmented management team to do a lot of the remaining integration post-close. So sort of integration within the confines of an M&A process. And all of this seemed very chaotic to everyone concerned. And you found M&A processes that were elongated and in many cases died as a result of fatigue and expense. There's only so many years and so many hundreds of thousands of dollars that buyers and sellers are going to waste on subpar results. And then you also found another iteration of this in the attempt to form supergroups that were partially integrated, not fully integrated, and again, a lot of failure around the topic. And I think to the side has been sort of a much more successful version of integration, which has been MSOs tucking in smaller versions of themselves and integrating 1, 2, 3 acquisitions at a time per year. But even there, now that we have Scale and we're inside with these management teams, there's a lot of frustration, there's a lot of failure. So if I had to sort of describe why the commonality in failure, regardless of how integration is taking place, I'd say it sort of starts at the core of sort of a misunderstanding of what integration actually means. And as we've been brought in so frequently now over the past 2 years to help different management teams at different platforms integrate, the commonality that we're seeing helps sort of define integration. But integration really is a verb that describes many different initiatives in many different disciplines that all center around sort of uniformity, organization, the return to normal, the return to a business identity, as opposed to abnormal, which is our one business has now become 2 businesses, which is in many respects not sustainable. And management teams know that. They know that the whole concept of scaling is to create efficiency and uniformity so that you can scale more. Where you don't create efficiency and uniformity, you run out of room to scale. And you literally have these MSO platforms that will take a year, 2 years, 3 years, and sometimes permanently stop growing because they ran out of room to scale, born of a failure to integrate. So what we've been able to see accidentally, to be honest with you, because I don't know that we knew this scientifically when we started, is that actually Scale is a very good laboratory, scientific laboratory for what integration is. Scale was formed with the goal of addressing every need imaginable with a true dedicated expert. That's why there's so many of us, so many people who have joined Scale so quickly. And I think in many respects, it's a little unprecedented in healthcare. What happens when you get all those experts in one room is interesting. When it comes to integration, we end up acting like almost like a perfect plug-in solution for the multi-dimensional, multifaceted aspects that are core to integration. What's troubling about integration is twofold. One, it's intermittent. It shows up and then it disappears. You don't, as a CEO and your many C-suites, go to work every day expecting to spend half your day integrating. That happens when you've just acquired an asset. And then you attach to that asset a 1 or 2 year integration period, and then you assume that you're going back to normal. So you're not actually building a management team for integration unless you become a much larger company, your acquisitions are constant, and your owners are willing to spend the resources on a fully dedicated integration team. And that does happen, but it usually happens much further on in the evolution of where we are today with most of our MSOs. So our management teams are simply not built to do this work. So that's problem number one. They're at capacity already. Problem number 2 is integration is really the integration of your pair contracting team, your RCM, your pathology group that's just integrating another pathology group, your IT and systems, your legal, your patient goodwill and experience, your HR departments, you can keep going down the list and everyone sees it's really about integrating 25 different things simultaneously. And so other initiatives like let's go build an ASC footprint, you can define them as much more narrowly. That's not to say that they're not complex too, but you have a team, they're in charge, they're responsible. Integration, in its essence, really requires every team to take a leadership role, every team to allocate resources, every team to report back on progress. And so we find ourselves using a multitude of our experts simultaneously in integration. And that, I would say that's one of probably the one example where we do really advocate for that. Most of the time where we are asked to help an MSO team, we might be asked to help with 15 different initiatives. We will naturally come back and recommend that we get through all those initiatives, but we do so somewhat sequentially, because we don't want to overwhelm the management team by doing 15 things in parallel with 15 different scale experts. Integration tends to be the exception to that rule, where you really do have 15 fires that you need to put out simultaneously, or you're not quite sure how steady the ship will be while you take your time on integrating pathology. So it just requires so much more manpower, knowledge, and resource allocation that it truly is overwhelming. And that's why I think you find a lot of complaints from management teams when it comes to integration directed at the ownership. And that's why we're finding a lot less friction in bringing in outside help when it comes to integration. I think in terms of what's changed a year ago versus now, the more time that we spend in the space and the more established and the more case studies we have of helping management teams, I think the greater the velocity is of demand for a group such as us, such as Scale, to really provide that assistance.
Well, and I will add one more phenomenon from my experience is you have a lot more sophisticated physicians who entering into a sales process, maybe they have an investment banker guiding them through, maybe it's a sophisticated law firm, or they themselves are simply more educated because their peers have gone through several acquisitions at this point, that they have seen the market and they've seen successful integration. You have a lot more sophisticated physicians now who are asking their potential future partners to really explain how are they going to be successful in the life after the deal. The life after the deal has become a really important conversation in the business development cycle. So I think that's another phenomenon that's driving, on top of, just sheer deal volume, the compression on the sales team and the leadership team on all the other things they have to focus on, that integration is a topic that is much more focused on now than it was in recent times. And to be honest, physician practice management companies aren't alone in that, right? Lots of industries that involve humans, any business type, but those that involve humans. And, in a law firm, I'll be the first to admit, we spend a lot of time talking about how we improve integration, how we ensure that our successfully recruited lateral law firm partners who have incredibly valuable skills are really going to integrate and be successful into the team. So I appreciate the things that you're sharing, because it resonates both from our healthcare clients, but also even within the firm and the things that we're focusing on.
Yeah, so I see the role of us as being very similar. Our focus is different, but the responsibility is the same, right? And we need to apply a duty of care based on seeing what we see every day, sharing the knowledge that we've gathered with others that are really entrusted with making final decisions. We're really not in the final decision business, Scale. We're in the advisory business. So how good is our advice? Well, we're busy integrating ourselves. We acquired 2 businesses in the second half of last year. We expect to acquire 2 more companies this year. Every time we close on a transaction, we're left with years worth of integration, monthly board meetings with our subsidiaries, allocated full-time resources to integrating those subsidiaries, dealing with the success and dealing with the failures along the way. That helps, giving advice based on your own firsthand experience of what it's like is useful. So I do think our industry gets very excited about value creation because there's so much opportunity to create value in it. And you and I, and we've been talking about this for a while, we're witness to so much value creation in healthcare. It's unbelievable. It's unlike many other industries that in many respects are far more mature than ours. But the onus is on us to always remind everyone, wherever possible, to be responsible about all that value creation. Because there's also, if you're irresponsible, the opportunity to create a lot of value destruction. And so this is one of those topics where this is a wonderful thing. Integration is wonderful and growth is wonderful and MSO development. How many billion-dollar businesses are we creating here in less than 5 to 10 years? We're used to seeing billion-dollar businesses created over centuries. The timeline here has been compressed by an order of magnitude. So we are moving 10 times faster as an industry than what I would say is normal. So look, if you're going to drive a car at 100 miles an hour versus 10 miles an hour, really, really pay attention. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to help management teams every day, wherever possible, pay even more attention. And the way that we do that is by doing some of their work alongside them and bringing them the benefit of all of our experience. We're not perfect. We are a growing business. We're a rapidly growing business. So we're learning lessons along the way too, ourselves. And thankfully, so far, we've had some really good clients, some really good partners. We've worked with some really amazing private equity groups and lenders as well, and lawyers such as yourselves, that the basic focus that we have is appreciated and supported by many.
Well, Roy, I want to give you one more chance to add any final tip, final thought on integrating physician practices and physician practice management. Maybe it's a pitfall. Maybe if it's something you've seen done particularly well that you think that teams should emulate. But any final thoughts before we close up today?
Yeah, I would say more and more we're seeing that integration involves MSO integration as much as it involves practice integration. So just keep that in mind too. There's a lot of business functions that are being acquired along with the individual practice. Frequently, you're looking at multi-site acquisitions that come with either explicit MSOs or implicit MSOs. Those people are there. So you just have to think about it from a multidimensional perspective. And the last suggestion I would make is hope is not a strategy and neither is ignorance. So hopefully for those that are really delving or slicing the onion, so to speak, on how complex and time-consuming and challenging integration can be, they can join us in this conversation and see that this is a topic really worth spending a lot of time on.
Well, Roy, thank you for joining me today to talk about this very important topic of not only practice, but to the point you just made, MSO integration for your PPM businesses. Really appreciate your insights. They are invaluable, and best of luck in your own scale ongoing integration.
Thank you so much, Amber. You're the best.